Hi, Jeff Rhodes here again with another video on Microsoft 365 based on my book, Creating Business Applications with Microsoft 365. And I want to talk today about Power Apps and user-defined functions. I know they've been out in preview for a little while, but I haven't done a video on them yet. So I thought I'd build an app that's similar to some earlier videos that where we use Power Automate, but I wanted to stick with Power Apps and see if we could build an app that you could pick a time in your calendar, or if you had the rights to somebody else's calendar, and it would come back and tell you whether that's free and show you the events that's in there. And you'll see with all the dates and stuff, it's a lot easier to do it with user-defined functions. And with many things, I thought I'd first go into Copilot and say, okay, you can see I tried here. What's a good use case for user-defined functions? So I thought it was kind of interesting. Let's see what it does this time, because notice I've got the work set up, so it should give me some of my own information and also go to the web and tell us about it. So let's see what it does. So it says it's reusable logic and gives us some examples. So it's kind of interesting. Yeah, and then it says internal example from your own work. And in some of my earlier videos, I put some of the chapters from my book in there, so it talks about some of the things that could do inside there. And then a great site, if you haven't been to MatthewDevaney.com, it's got some great examples of user-defined functions. So kind of fun there, but let's go ahead and get started. So what I wanted to do is build that app that I mentioned, and it's a little bit involved, so it'll take us a few minutes, but I'm going to go ahead and say create. And I'm going to start with a blank canvas. And this is one that really will fit on the phone. So I'm going to pick the phone size here. And I'm not going to do anything with responsive stuff today, nor am I going to do anything with the modern controls, because the classic controls work just fine for this as well. So let's set that up. But let's go check our settings, because the first thing I do want to do is you want to make sure the user-defined functions is turned on. In particular, there's these behavioral functions that I'm going to use at the end. That's kind of the key here. So I'm going to scroll down here, and we have this user-defined functions here. So we want to make sure we turn that on. So I'm going to close that, and I'll go ahead and save while I'm at it. And I'll just call this video. If I get my hands in the right spot, and we'll say I'll just say scheduling open spots. So don't necessarily need user-defined functions for that, but we'll see how it is. So what I really want to do, if you've watched any of those videos on scheduling, is that we have a whole lot of times, and all these times and dates and stuff have to be in the universal format and so forth. So what I want to do is build this so that I can pick a date and time, and not necessarily even my own time zone, because one of the things I've done a lot, I've been a remote employee where I'm in mountain time, but I keep my computer in Eastern time and so forth. So I want to be careful it's not trying to get it from my own machine. But I actually can pick that. Or maybe if my boss is in a different time zone, I just want to be able to set that. So first thing I'll do, let's just draw some control. So the first thing I want to do is a date. So I'm going to take a date picker here. And I want to make this kind of small because I want to have room for that. So let's see how big I made it on my example. Yeah, so that'll work there. And I'll call that, just leave it date picker 1 for now, but I'm going to insert a drop down. And because as you know, the date picker doesn't give us any time, so we need to build our own time. So I'm going to make this with 150, and I'll just call this the hour box. And what I want to do, this is kind of a nice technique where we can go in and set the items I just want to be able to pick them on the half hour. And so rather, I could do like some sort of SharePoint list or something like that, but there's really no reason here. So rather than drop down sample, I'll just paste that in. But you see, I just did an array of, let me format that a little bit. Yeah, as you can see, I did an array of just every half hour with just the brackets, the square brackets on every side. So let's put that back up there. So I'll put that right next to it, kind of like that. And then let me copy and paste that one because it's about the right size that I want. And this one will just be AM or PM. And I could do 24-hour clock, of course. And when you're reading universal time, which we'll see, it's good if you understand the universal clock because it does come through as 24-hour time. So instead of 9 p.m., it's 21. We used to do in the military 2100, right? So AM, PM box I'll do here. And let me see if I'm going to make that a little bit thinner there. Yeah, make that a little bit. I'll make this 120 just so it fits pretty well. There we go. And then I'm going to need a couple more. So I'll just copy. Let's copy that one again, make it a little wider. And this one's going to be our time zone. So I'll make this, let's see, make it about 220 width. And I'm going to call it time zone box. Oops. And as you might guess from how I've been doing this so far, this will be Eastern, Central, and I'm just going to do the US time zones here. And actually it doesn't get Hawaii and Alaska, so I apologize if you're doing it from there, but you can add to it, but I'll just do the 4 kind of contiguous ones in there. And then the last thing that we need, universal time doesn't have daylight savings time. And in some of my earlier videos, I've shown how you can find this time zone offset. But here I'm not going to do that because, like I said, I really want to be able to set that. And it may be like you're doing it in next November, which is no longer daylight savings time. So I just want to be able to set that. And that's one of our user-defined functions that we'll do. So I'll do a checkbox. And I'll just put it right over here. And I'll have to do, we'll call this daylight savings box. And we'll give we'll say daylight savings time. And I'll make this a little wider. So let's get the heights the same too. Like that. So that was a 70 height. So let's make this 70. And we'll make this. Let's see what I did on my other one. I did 371. So let's try 370 and see what it does. Yeah, there we go. Actually, it's a little longer than it needs to be, but that's okay. We'll make that match up. There we go. Close enough. And then the other thing that we'll need, it's a lot easier to use some labels to keep these straight, these various times and so forth that we're due. So I'm going to put some of these in there and I'll just label them as well. Actually, we don't really even need to label them, but I'm going to use 3 of those. I'll do another one there, another one. And what we want to put in here is our start date. So let me go ahead and save here. And the other thing we're going to need to do is we're going to need it. Where's my data here. I'll find it. All right, well, I'm back. I was over here when I was doing my sample, the add data moved to the top, but now it's back where I expected it on the side. So let's add our Outlook because we're going to need that so we can, oh, guess I got to add it first. There we go. And I want Office 365 Outlook. So we will need that in a minute. So we'll come back to that. So let's talk about our user-defined functions because we're just going to build a bunch of those. So how do you find them? Okay, and what you do is you click the app and then you have formulas here. And I'll need to make this nice and big. And so this is really nice because if you're like me and you've done this for a long time, you've maybe had solutions where you have a button and then you do something in the button and then you have lots of spots in it. You say send select, you select the button, and it's just a bit hokey and everything. So we're going to just put them in here and works really well. So the first thing I'm going to want is I want to have a get date time function because I've got to build, remember I got those individual combo boxes. I got a date and then I got the hour, I've got the AM, PM, I've got the time zone, all that stuff. So we'll do the time zone in a minute. But first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to get the date time. So that's the name of my function. And then I need to put my parameters in. So date text is a type of date. So you can see I'm going to put from what I get from the date picker into there. And then I'm going to say hour, minute is going to be text. And AM, PM is going to be text. And what I'm going to return then is a date time. And then what you say is equals. And then now we just build, and what it's looking for is an expression. Now, if you need to do a more complicated and set variables, I'll cover that at the end. You need to go in and put the squiggly brackets in. And then that's more of a user-defined, what they call a behavioral function. So what I want to do, let me build this from the inside. So I always first have to put the text together. So I say the date text. Notice that's a date object, so I can give it a format, date time format, and you want that to be the short date. So not the short date time, but just the short date like that. So that's kind of the inside of the function. And then what we need to do is we want to concatenate, so we need a space. And then we need put the hour minute in there and see how that parameter shows up. And we need another blank, another space like that, and then say AM, PM. So all of that is the text that we want to turn in back into a date time. So then what we do is we use the date time value function and put all that inside of it. And then notice I still got the little red squiggle, so I need to put the semicolon on, and then that will give us our function. So there's our first one. And we'll come back to that in a minute. So the next thing I'm going to want to do is I'm going to want to figure out our offset based on the time zone. Okay, so let's build another one. So I'm going to call this determine UTC offset. And this is, in this case, is the amount of hours we want to add. So if you're in the US, UTC is like Greenwich Mean Time. It's later, so you're going to add. So these will be positive. Oftentimes when you see these offsets, they're negative because Mountain Time is like 6 hours behind UTC and that depends on daylight savings and so forth. But to add it back, it needs to be positive. So, but anyway, so we're going to need to use that all over the place. So again, I'm going to pass in time zone, which is text, And then I'm going to have a Boolean based on that checkbox. Is daylight savings time? And that's a Boolean, true or false. And what we're going to pass back is a number. And then we got all these options. I got those 4, and it could even be more if you're doing that. So this is a good example of a switch statements. In other languages, you'll call it a conditions or case statements, another depending on the language. So what I'm going to do is a switch on. You can see I get the choices here. So the value is the time zone. Again, the time zone that I'm passing in. So first choice is Eastern, in which each of these you just say what the value is, and then it's the formula or the result that you're going to do. So I need to have, now I can do an if based on the daylight savings. So I can say if is daylight savings time. So if that's true, then it's 4 hours. If it's not, which is the false, it's 5 hours. Like that. So let's copy these because these are all similar. So I'm going to just copy that like that. So I'll paste in, and then that's central, and I just keep adding an hour as we go west. So this will be 5 and then 6, comma, paste it again. This is mountain, and this is 6. Oops. 6 and 7. And one more. Pacific. And 7, 8. Then we just need one more, and we can format text on that one as well. So that bottom one of these is what I wanted to do was put the time zone offset. So let's go ahead and just do that one. And then I need a little bit more to do the other text. So I'm going to say time zone offset. And I'll say colon, get a space, and then I'll say determine. And notice how that offset shows up. That was the user-defined formula right there, and it tells us what we want to do. So I just say time zone box dot selected text dot value. Don't make the mistake of just putting the selected text because it wants that value part. And then we need daylight savings box dot value. That already is a true false. Like that. And so let's play with it for a minute. So we can say, okay, if it's, let's go to mountain time. So if it's not daylight savings, it's 7. If it's time zone offset is 6. So that's great. We'll test that in for a little bit later, but so far, so good. All right, so let's go back to our formulas here. And now we're getting ready to kind of do a more elaborate formula here. So let's go back here and add it. So let's just scroll down here a little bit. And our next one is convert start date time to UTC. And so we're going to want is date text is date. Okay, hour, minute. So this is going to be similar to our one, and we'll see why in a minute that we did before. AM, PM text. And then we need time zone offset is number. And what we want to return is the text, because we're going to need not a date object, but we need it in UTC, what they call ISO 8061 format. And we'll see what that looks like in a minute. All right, so we're going to say, actually, let's start from the inside. So first thing I'm going to want to do is, so if you might remember, if you looked at my other videos, when we're doing our calendar offset, we want to go off the top of the hour. So I add 1 minute for the start time, and then the end time would be the half hour later, and I go past that, so I go to basically from 1 to 29 minutes or from 31 to 59 minutes, so that we don't get that, because they're both, if it's back-to-back meetings at the top of the hour, it'll show both of them, where it may be free, but the previous meetings ending up. So what I need is I'm going to date add, and then I need a date to start with. So that's where we can use that function that we already did. So I can call this, and I can just paste all this stuff. And again, I use the user-defined function because I had a lot of logic there where I'm combining them, and I'm going to need the start date, I'm going to need the end date, which is the 29 minutes later, and no sense repeating all that logic. So that's the whole idea. So I put the hour, minute, and I put the AM, PM, like that. So that gives us the date. And then now I have the number of units. So I'm going to add 1, and I'm going to say time unit minutes. So this is going to add a minute. So when I pass in 8 o'clock, 8 a.m., it's going to go 8:01. And then I want to format that. So I use the text function. And then let me copy and paste it, because what you don't want to do is one of the options here, and I'll show you, that was the first one I did. So if I say, let me find, I have this one open. Yeah, it's date time format. Notice it has a UTC here, and I'll show you an example of doing that. And you can just pass in basically the date, but it does it based on your local time zone and all that, like I mentioned. So I don't want to do that. So I don't want to pick a UTC, because that's not just a format, that's a conversion. And so I want to paste it in like that. So that's what the kind of format that we want it to be. And so I'll close that up and then get the semicolon again. I'll format that so that we can see it. So let's try that out, because now that's the start date that we want. So I can take this first one, and I'll look over here, just make sure I get it right. So I'm going to say start date time in UTC format. Like that equals convert start date time to UTC. And then now I need to kind of organize this bit a little bit to get it to call it the correct way to get that time together. So I'm going to say, pause for just a minute. All right, so we want to put this in. The first thing we want is our first parameter is we want the date in the long format for this case. So we want to say, like, July 17th or whatever. So we're going to do text, and we're putting the date picker 1 dot selected date, and then we use that date time format, and we pick the long date like that. So that will make sure that we can, when we combine that it can understand that it's a date. And then we pass in the hour, so we have the hour box dot selected text dot value, kind of like we had in the time zone offset function, and we do the AM PM box selected text dot value, and then notice we need the time zone offset, so now we can go ahead and use that function that we did. Whoops. Yeah, determine UTC offset. And again, we'll use some of it. We just want the time zone box. Whoops, didn't pick at the time. Dot selected text dot value, and then we need the daylight savings box dot value. Right there. And then we can see actually right now it's not quite working, because notice it added the minute, but it gives us 00, which is 12 a.m. And what should have done is given us 6 or 7 hours, depending on 6 hours since we have it checked. So let's go look at our formula. I probably forgot something in there when I was looking at my other screen. Oh yeah, I see that. So I added the minute, but what I didn't do is I didn't add in the time zone offset. So let's try that again. We go back and look at my example. Yeah, because I had a date add inside of a date add, so I kind of missed one of those. So what I want to do is I want to do on the inside date add, I want to add the time to it. So I want to say date add again like that. And then after this one, then I want to do time zone offset, because it's passing us in that number, which is 6 or 7. And we want to tell it that the time unit is hours, like that. There we go. Let's format again so we can see it. So we have one date add that adds 6 hours or whatever, and then the second one that adds 1 minute to that. So let's go back and look and see if that fixed it. Yeah, there we go. So now it's 6 a.m. So right when I'm doing this is 5:55 p.m. on this date. So let's run it, and we can even check it. There's a little website we can do. So let's say 5:30 p.m. Notice it says 23:31. So if I can say get current UTC time. Oh, UTC now. There we go. So it's 23:56 now. I did it as, from the half hour, so it was 31. So let's go check it, but it was the 20. Oops. Come on. Not sure what, I got some sort of thing on it. Yeah, so we have that part right. So that works pretty well. So let's stop that out. Let's go back to our formula. So this will be a little bit similar for the next one. So I'm going to just copy this like that and paste it in, and I'm just going to, and I said state, this should be start, so we'll fix that. This should be convert end date time, and the only difference is we're going to add 29 minutes to that. And let's change this to start. See if it can pick it up, or if I have to fix my there. Yeah, it looks like I have to fix it because it didn't pick up, wasn't able to adjust the name of that. So we'll say to start. There we go. And actually I need to copy that anyway. So I'll go over here, paste that in. And we'll say end date time. And we'll say convert end date. That should be it. So if we're doing as well, this should be, yeah, so see it. That one starts, if I get that off, this is 23:31, this is 23:59. We got our time zone offset. And again, if we change that, then notice it puts it an hour later, actually moves it to the next day. All right, so we're doing okay here. So what I'm going to really want, I'm going to put a button on for now for us to, because it is easier to build it in a button first, and then we'll get rid of that button. So I'm just going to call this, I'm just going to say check, like that. And then I need a couple more things. So I'm going to put a label here. I'm going to see if I can copy it over or not. Let's see. Yeah, so at least brought it over there. Doesn't do much, but it gets it on there. So I'm going to have the text of this label be called var availability text, which might as well go ahead and start setting those up. So as you've probably done before, we can set our variables on the on start. So let me grab those because I got a number of variables to make this thing work. So I'll just paste them in and then we can talk about them. No sense watching me type them. So I'm going to do a color. So my variability color, I'm going to default to white. And then I've got some availability text, which is availability unknown. And then I'm going to look up the calendar ID. So if, because we have to actually pass it the ID in our function. So we're going to use another one. Remember, I already added this Office 365 Outlook get tables v2 value. We're looking for the name calendar. So this is where if you had a person that you were viewing their calendar, you'd put their name in. And the easiest way to see that is go to Power Automate and set it up there because you get a nice drop down and then use the same value. So let's go ahead and run on start. And we can actually go to variables and we'll see that like that calendar ID. See how it found my calendar? It's got all those, big IDs, and it got the color and the availability text. So far so good. And so I'm going to put that in there and we're going to set that color because the other thing we did is the fill color of that is that variable, so that as we say the check, and we're eventually going to do it when we change options there, is it's going to update that color based on whether it is. So the other thing we're going to do is I'll just add it here, but let's add in a table. Oops. And I'll just add in that data table and I'll move it. Let's see if I can move this down. Here we go. Do it something like that. And what we want, I've got another variable we're going to build, and it's going to be var calendar data. So I'll have to wait till I set that up to set the rest of this table up, but it's going to show the events that were on the time that we did, and where it's going to show the subject of it, and it's going to show the show as, whether it's free or busy, so that we can, we only want to turn it red if it's something that's where we're busy. And so let's go over to the check now. So this is where it gets a little bit more complicated, but not too bad. So what we're going to do, so first thing I'm going to do is that's real simple. So I'm just going to take that same set statement, set it to white, because it takes a little, only a few seconds. But when they click the button, then it turns that calendar white right away, because it could be a different one. And then we're going to set, and then I'm going to call that var calendar data, or I'm going to set that there. And then that's where we're now going to use this function. So we're going to say Office 365 Outlook, and then it's get calendar events. So let's see if we can scroll down to that. Get calendar events, view V3. And again, if you looked at my Power Automate videos, we call the exact same thing from Power Automate. And notice what it tells us. So the first thing it wants is that calendar ID. So we put that var calendar ID. And then what it wants is it wants the start date time in UTC formats. That's why we did all that work. So we could go and copy all that. And actually, I probably will, so you don't have to type it. Watch me type it again. So we just want this business that we already did in our check thing. So we're just going to call that like that. And then we need the end time, so we'll come over to this one. Same kind of thing. And again, you can see why this is so nice to have user-defined variables or functions, because if we didn't have these user-defined functions, we'd be repeating all this over and over. And there, so that's good. And then we get some filters and all that kind of stuff, but we don't actually need that. And so what we want to do, so we don't need any more commas, but I think I need one more like that, dot value. There we go. And then I need like that. And we can format that, and it puts it in nice, pretty thing. So let's go look at it again. So again, we just we have the var calendar data, and then we're going to set the variable because the return value of that is, or this one, the return value is a table, and that's what we're going to link to that table object. And we just pass it the ID, we pass it the start date and time and end date and time, and then we just read the value. So we have a few more things, kind of a cleanup. So I'll just put them in there and then we'll talk through them, because not a whole lot of stuff, so rather than watch me type them in this case. So put a little bit of a comment and say, okay, we're going to loop through the entries to find the first event with a show as busy, and then set values if there's no matches. So we're going to set var has match, and we're going to filter. So again, we have this data, and one of the columns is busy. So we're going to filter it. And so if there's, and then we're going to say, okay, if var has matches, whether that filter is greater than 0. So if we have at least one event, because we could have 10 events at the same time, but if at least one of them is busy, then we're going to say we don't have that we have a match, which is true, which just means that we have a conflict. And then we're going to do some if. So we say if it has a match, then we're going to set the availability text. There are competing events, and then we're going to count the rows to say, okay, how many events are there, at least total. And then we're going to set, and I kind of played this as dark salmon, so it's a light enough red that we can read the black text behind it. So notice I've got a semicolon between those. So this is, all of this is if it's true, and then we've got the comma, so this is if it's false. So there are no busy events, and then it does tell the comma, the number of events total, and then says the color is a dark sea green. All right, so let's come back, and I've got my calendar here. I'm going to set for tomorrow. So I'm doing this on a Saturday, but I'm going to be doing a run tomorrow this is 7 a.m. And I've got something else, 2 of them at 8:30. Go from 8 to 8:30. So if I do 7, I should get 1. If I do 8:30, I should get, or if I get 8, I should get 2. And if I do 8:30, I should get 0. So that should get enough for us to test it. So let's try it. So let's make sure we've already saved. So I'm going to change it to tomorrow. And I'm going to say 7 a.m. And it's Mountain Time, Daylight Savings. You can see it's converted it. I check that. It says there are competing events with a busy status. Now I can't actually see what those are. Oh, and I should have mentioned, by the way, just for testing, I've got this Charlie Brown out of office, because that's one of the things you get in a work environment, people sending you stuff, they're out of office, or maybe one of your spouse or something sends you a calendar invite that you want to know about, but you mark it as free so it doesn't block up your calendar. So we want to make sure that that's working as well. So it seems like it's working so far, but we can't see them yet. So now that I've run that once, I can go ahead and come here, and now I can add fields. So I'm going to, and it's not showing, adding fields for some reason. Let's see. Because var data, looks like it's got the data there. So let me pause for a minute, see if I can figure out why it's not working. All right, well, I'm back. I had to leave the app and come back in, so didn't really do anything. But notice now it's still the same thing. Items is val calendar data, but then if the add field is enabled now, so all I want is the subject, and then I want the show as, and it'll go in the order that I do it there. And so now I need to run this again, but I know I already know the show as is not very long. It just says free or busy, so we'll just put that over like that. So let's run on start, and I'll have to run that again. So I change the date to tomorrow, and I change it for 7 a.m. Mountain Time, Daylight Savings. Check. There we go. So we got the Charlie Brown out of office is free, but I got that practice run as busy. So let's try it for 8. And this is where we're going to change this thing. So what I really like to do is when I change it, I'd like it to just update itself. And that's why we're going to take this button text and script and put it into the user defined function and get rid of this check button altogether. But for now we have to run it that way. So I've got 2 of them. I'm supposed to change my contacts and have that run still, and I've got the out of office. But if I go to 8:30, then it turns that dark green. There are no busy events. There are still 1 total event. It's the Charlie Brown out of office. So getting close. Know this video's gone on for a while, but we will get there. So what we want to do now is I literally want to copy all of that, and I'm going to I'll copy it, and I'm going to set the visible of that to false, just so we can get rid of it. If we really felt good, I'm only getting rid of it because we may have to go back and test it if it doesn't work. So what I want to do now is I'm going to go back to that app, go to formulas, and we're going to need a lot of space here. And what I want to call that, see if I can call it the same thing I did before so I don't mess it up. Yeah, update availability, I called it. So let's do that. So I'm going to say update availability. I don't have any parameters, and I'm going to just return back a Boolean in case I want it. And first thing we can do is just paste all that in, but you'll see it doesn't actually work. I got all this squiggly bracket, so thought that we had a problem, but if you look it up, that's that behavioral thing. So all you got to do, if you want to have all this logic and set these variables and stuff, is just put a squiggly bracket at the beginning, whoops, got into a thing, and then do a squiggly bracket at the end. And again, we need that semicolon. So we can format it. And so now everything that we want to do can get called from that function. So I'm just going to copy that. Let's collapse this because it's kind of a little longer than we needed. And now what I want to do is all my objects, I just want to go to the onChange event, and it's all false now, but we just say update availability like that. Change. So anytime we change either of these, oh, of course I got an error. Oh, I got something that says false. Oh, I see. Here I didn't get rid of false there. Here we go. Nothing to worry about. Make sure I select it before I paste this time. Same on the time zone. And on the daylight savings time. And notice that one's not on change, but it's on check. So if you check or uncheck, it'll do it. Now let's go back my calendar. I've got an anniversary. My anniversary was recently, so I'm leaving at 10:30. So if I change it to like 11 a.m. or something, it should change. But we'll see if we can change it to 10, then change it to 10:30, and looks like it. I've got it blocked out till 3 our time. So let's try that. So let's go ahead and I'll save that and run it. So now it's still the right day, but let's go till 10. Notice how it updated Charlie Brown out of office. I go to 10:30. Now I've got that brunch. Just make it a little bit 11:30, still brunch. Let's change it to 2:30 a.m. Notice that it said, oh, I'm definitely free at 2:30 a.m., but let me switch it to p.m. I've still got that brunch. I still got the Charlie Brown out of office. But if I go to 3, it's free. And by the way, going back that we talked about, that's why we do this offset with the 1 to the 29, because if I done it right at 3, it would be the end of that meeting, and it would look like I still had a conflict. But I'm really saying, are they free for scheduling something at 3? So I want to look at a minute past, assuming that you're doing it on the half hour. So, all right. Well, I hope that was helpful. Again, we use these user-defined functions very frequently on this, and it gives us a place to have kind of one central place to get our logic. So look forward to seeing you next time. Be sure to subscribe if you haven't already. Have a great day.